Welcome to the WZCC Chamber of Commerce Australia's month-long series, HERstory, celebrating International Women's Day 2021. Stories of strong, resilient, powerful women. Our guest today is a young, dynamic young female, Avan Daruwalla. Avan Daruwalla is originally from Sydney and now a third-year ANU student studying politics, philosophy, and economics and development studies. She is the 2021 ANU Women's Officer, representing the interests of women and non-binary students to the ANU and ANU Student Association. Her primary role is to provide advocacy, support, and representation. She advocates for improved SASH support, resources, and services, as well as cultural change and community safety. I have, full disclosure, I have known Ava for many years, too many years to name. But do we really know anyone? I didn't. I thought I knew Ava, but I didn't. Not till a few weeks ago, when there was a march, women's march, onto Canberra and right around Australia. And I switched on the TV and on the papers, newspapers, and staring straight at me was young Ava, advocating something. And I didn't have the time to record it, but her dad did, and I have seen that recording Ava. Ava took part in this march and has gained quite a lot of followers because of this. So let me first welcome Ava. Ava, welcome. Thank you very much for being here today. I know you're in the midst of test papers and the like, and thank you for being here today and giving us your time. I just want to ask you first, tell us something about being a women's officer. What do other universities have this role too? Do they? And because ANU is the premier university in Australia, and I think probably leads the way. So tell us something about this women's officer role that you have.
Yeah, I'd love to. Most universities do have a similar role. A lot of universities, so they'll have a student council, which is like a union, and basically a body to represent the students' views to the university, because I think often it feels like the unis will treat us like customers instead of like students. So it's really important to have like those voices represented. And then within these student unions, there's usually a voice for different marginalized groups. There'll be a women's officer, there'll be a queer officer, an officer for ethnic people or people from Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Sometimes there's a disabilities officer. Like all these different roles are very important so that the uni can hear from diverse student backgrounds. Yeah. Oh, I hope you're okay.
So how did, this is an elected position, right? So you stood for elections and you were elected last year, and that's how you are now the women's officer. What exactly is your role in this?
Yeah. My role is a little bit complicated. Basically, it's split into two parts, which are advocacy and pastoral care. So in terms of advocacy, I'll do advocacy on behalf of students to the university. So it might be something as like plain and logical as like advocating for more security in dangerous areas, or it might be something more like advocating for better disclosure training for people who have to deal with survivors of sexual assault and sexual violence. Or it could be something more complicated, like trying to get, a third-party provider like the Canberra Rape Crisis Centre to come into the university and have a presence on campus. And then in terms of support and pastoral care, I'm basically available to any woman or non-binary person on campus that has any problem or just wants to talk. So I'm there to consult and I'm there to support them. And often they'll come to me when they've had a serious issue or something really awful has happened to them and they don't know who else to go to. So that's the main part of the role, yeah.
So how do you actually manage both these? I mean, like studying for your thing and also this role that you're playing? Because this role is quite a crucial, critical role as far as I can see. So how do you manage both? Because is it difficult? I'm sure it is.
I think it can be difficult sometimes because I think sometimes when I'm studying, like, I'll be like doing my microeconomics study for some exam, and it feels sometimes like so useless because I'm just, I'm like trying to memorize some formula or graph. And then I'm thinking in the back of my head, oh, I could be responding to these emails right now that real people are behind. Like, I think it can be very hard to navigate feeling like one part of your life or one part of your job is like really important and the rest of it is like you're just doing it for a degree.
Mm. So with this role, who do you report to?
So I'm actually very lucky in that I don't directly report to anyone.
Okay.
I have a committee and I have 2 deputies who work with me, but essentially I'm supposed to respond to all the women on campus. So if they have feedback or if they feel like I'm not doing a good job, they're who I'm accountable to.
All right. And then obviously you have a budget and things like that you have to manage.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Fantastic. And you have a team that sort of supports you and they look after certain aspects of it alongside with you.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. So tell me a little bit about the march that you joined in a couple of weekends ago, a couple of weeks ago. It was right around Australia, but mainly the one that I'm interested in was the one that you took part in front of the Australian Parliament. So how did you get involved with that?
It was quite a long process actually, because in the lead up there was a lot of like internet and media coverage about the March for Justice, it was essentially born out of the Brittany Higgins allegations of misconduct within Parliament House. So then it sparked this movement called March for Justice, and I heard about it online, and I joined a Facebook group which was quite small at the time of people who wanted to start a movement and start this protest. And I offered my help and my support, and I was added to a group chat, and it started to get very, very messy and big and out of hand because essentially it was this one body organizing protests all across Australia. So I tried to focus on young people and ANU because I felt like they weren't really getting a voice in the movement. Like, I think that it had become quite like white middle-aged women centric, and I think it was really important for there to be young people and people of color and people from diverse backgrounds and transgender women and non-binary people represented, because they hadn't really been given a voice, and it felt kind of like they were being excluded, even though like sexual violence is something that affects all women.
Yes. So this march was, of course, mainly a result, as you said, of sexual allegations in Parliament, etc. But the women's movement, to me, is much broader, and maybe that's also the remit that you have through the Women's Office at the ANU. It's not just about rape or sexual assault. It's so much about equity, equality, the misogyny that you would face, as not only as a young woman, but also as a woman of color. So I think to me that is so much broader than just the fact that there are these allegations in Parliament. So what kind of platform do you need or do you have now to sort of broaden this thing rather than just speak about at the march, but also then to carry this forward? Because the march was very successful in the sense that it got a lot of media coverage. But what happened after that? So the main thing is, I suppose this is two questions in one. One, are you satisfied with what's happening after that, after just the march? And also, secondly, do you have a platform or an ongoing platform with those people who organize the march to broaden the women's affairs issues? Because they are much, much broader and much more serious, for all women.
Yeah, I think it's difficult because I'm definitely not satisfied. That would be the basic answer. But I think it's very difficult for any group to like cover all issues. So I think it was important that the march focused specifically on, sexual violence, because it is such a large, like widespread issue.
Yes.
But you're so right. Like, gender equity issues like span much, much more more, like much further than that. And I think that a problem that a lot of young people see is that they don't get a platform and they don't get a voice in the issues apart from with their peers. So it sometimes does feel like we're in these little echo chambers of like, oh, we're just talking to each other and we all agree with each other, but we're not actually accessing the media, or not actually accessing like the powerful people who can make real policy change. So I think that was one good thing about the march, is that it really hyper-focused the media and the internet on this issue, so that, you know, powerful people had to listen and they had to respond. And I think that for me, like my platform, it can feel kind of small in the scale of such a big movement, but I think it's important that students create their own movement so that their voices can be heard, because essentially, like, we're just being told by all these older women and all these older people that these issues have existed their entire lives and they've been marching their whole lives and nothing's changed. So we just don't want that to happen to us.
I think that's the kind of thing that I was looking at, in the sense that I don't want to disclose how old I am. I suppose one can make out from the gray in my beard. But I've for years now I've been hearing about women's affairs. You know, how they're suffering financially, for example. That, you know, if for the same job, a male would get much more than a female would, and that, you know, like you could walk down the street and you get wolf whistles, and, you know, there's misogyny. There's so much. Then the misogyny, you know, went as far as in Parliament once, when we had a female prime minister. So these are things that have been going on for a very long time, and all I see is that there is a movement, there's some force, like the march, and then after that there's a hiatus. And that is why I'm not a very big fan, and I'll be very frank with you. I'm not a big fan of celebrating International Women's Day, because to me that means you're only celebrating it one day in the year. And it is, to me, as a male, it's very much a token thing. What am I doing the rest of the 364 or 365 days, depending on whether it's a leap year? What am I doing? I mean, I can have like these podcasts, the series of podcasts, and they were really, really very good, in the sense that we spoke to so many people, so many women on their stories. But I feel quite frustrated by the fact that we tend to sort of celebrate Women's Day. The very fact that we have to celebrate a Women's Day, to me, means that there is no equality, there's no equity, there is still a lot of diverse this thing. So to me, the frustrating part of it is this, and I'm sure that probably young women like you would feel the same way. So I guess I don't know whether there's any short answer or an easy answer to this, but what can we do, or what should we do? Because I think having the march and then getting a few people to say, yes, we'll form committees, and we'll, you know, a committee is one way of not doing anything, right? You form a committee when you don't want to do anything. So to me, it's the frustrating part that I saw this movement. I saw parts of the whole march, including your involvement in that, which made me very proud. Saying, oh, I know her. But, you know, to me, the frustrating thing was, after that, the powers that be, the people that who can make a change, you know, the catalyst for change, it's just politics. There's nothing happening. And I'm sure that frustrates young people like you too. So what do you think you can do in your role as women's officer, and you've got a voice, or what should men like me do?
I think that's such a good point, and I completely agree about the point about International Women's Day. I don't celebrate International Women's Day for the same reasons, and also because I feel like it's been so corporatized. Like it's this thing now. It's like girl boss culture. Like rich white boardroom people celebrate, and they like paint their nails or like have a fancy breakfast. But I don't know how that's helping anyone.
That's right. So what should we do?
I feel like it's one of those situations where it's best to ask the women in your life what you can do to support them and to support the movements that they are behind. I think like just general things are always like listening, making sure that when you're in spaces in which you feel like misogynistic behavior is taking place, you speak up. Because even if it was you and I and someone else, and they said something, they spoke over me, or they took credit for my idea or something like that, if you don't speak up for me, I'm never going to get credit, because if I speak up, I'll be called, you know, a raging feminist or bossy or a bitch.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's really important to be an active ally, and speak up for the people around you and empower their voices. Say, like, if you said, oh, Ava was actually speaking, I'd like to hear what she has to say. That's really powerful.
I think that's one way to start, and I think the other way is that men like me, for example, and I'm sure quite a few of our listeners and listening today will agree. I think we have to take some kind of responsibility for the change. I don't think that you all can make the change by yourself. And there's another term that I don't like at all. It's called women empowerment. To me, when I say that I'm going to empower women, that means I'm actually, in a patronizing sort of way, I'm saying, here, I've got some power. Here, I'll share a little bit with you. So there's no such thing as empowerment. That to me is a very sort of like it smacks of saying, okay, let me give you a little bit of my power. So I believe that there should be women power, but I think the main thing is to start with our children and our grandchildren. Now it's too late for me for my children, but my grandchildren, and especially my son and my grandson, and even with my daughter, we just want to let them know that they are both equal. That there's no such thing as he's a boy, so he shouldn't cry and he shouldn't do this or whatever. So I think it starts with a lot of us in a family sort of background, and start small from there, and then let the movement take place. Otherwise, I think all that will happen is I'll probably do a series of podcasts next March and invite you again, or invite some of the other women, and we'll all be talking about the same issues again and again and again with no real change.
Mm.
So I think that's something that we have to think about. It's something that I think, even if you can start, I think you have a very powerful role in as a women's officer in the ANU. So you're not only representing women, but you can also, I think, let the boys, the males know how it is, and what your problems are. Like we were saying, you have an idea, then somebody steals it and says it's mine, or people talk over you. I think these are things that I've seen in my corporate days. Exactly that what I've seen. So I think maybe you with this voice that you have, is it a 1 year term, or do you have a, yeah? So in your 1 year term, and then hopefully if you get another second term, I think you probably need to educate the boys, the males. I think that's a very powerful, because if once at that stage they get to see that you have a voice, that you have the power to be able to communicate to them, maybe they can be catalysts for change. So it's something like that. Because if the ANU has this women's office thing, I think it's a great idea. But at the same time, it shouldn't. I don't feel it should only be restricted to you serving and looking after women's interests. I think a spin-off of that is the fact that if you can, start talking to the males around you and saying that this is what we are doing, this is what we're doing, these are the difficulties we have. I think that kind of communication, would be fantastic. But I mean, that's just me.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Like, ideally, we would be at a place where I could just do that and everyone could be a feminist.
Yeah.
But I think, unfortunately, we're at a stage at the moment where it is so much sexism and so much just like patriarchal values that create like toxic masculinity, that unfortunately a lot of my job and a lot of my time is spent supporting women through really like traumatic events. But it would be really good to like feel like more men were our allies and could also be there for the women in their lives.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, and I mean, I don't think I think a lot of these things, the change has to come from the top. So maybe from the university chancellor, vice chancellor, whatever, you know, sort of showing how they support you and your your office and the work that you do, and then maybe also give you this opportunity to talk to everybody else. That's not the women, but as I said, your main remit is to look after the interests of women, and that's a very good cause, and it's excellent. More power to you. But I think also there needs to be, it has to come from the top, and it's like the directors who do that and stuff like that, and our politicians who sort of mainly, and I'm not trying to be political here, but mainly sitting on their hands just waiting for the next election, and they're not going to do anything, or they just pay lip service, or they don't pay you any service at all, or don't even listen to you. So yeah, I think it's a very difficult one. uh, just moving aside a little bit from that, One of the things that struck me when I watched you on TV and also read about the whole march and everything, including your little portion on it, I thought to myself, when did young Awa get involved in and become, well, I don't know about calling it a feminist because it sounds very, it has very negative connotations, at least in some people's minds. Calling somebody a feminist is a bit of a slur. Whereas I think you're more interested, you're passionate about women's affairs. When did this start and how?
Oh, I would definitely call myself a feminist. I don't mind that people have negative connotations. I think they can educate themselves about that.
Yeah.
I think I've always cared a lot about women's issues. And I think probably like some of that came from my mum. Like she's always been a feminist also. And also my school was a very progressive place. It was a public school, but it was a selective school. And I was surrounded by a lot of really, really incredible, really intelligent women from like diverse backgrounds. And everyone was so clever. And we would have these discussions all the time about, you know, the world we wanted to see and who we wanted to be when we were older. And the fact that we couldn't just do whatever we wanted. Like it felt like we were talking about what we wanted to do and also the obstacles we would have to get past that weren't just like education and stuff. It was also, you know, stereotypes and values and generalizations we would have to beat. So I think that there was never an opportunity for me to not be a feminist. You know, I'm a woman and like I want to protect myself and my values. And I think that means I have to protect the values of other women too.
So apart from your mum, who is your role model, anyone else?
Oh, I think lots of people.
Who do you look up to?
I look up to my dad too. I think there are a lot of really powerful women. I think, you know, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez is incredible. Jacinda Ardern, a lot of really powerful women in the media. You know, a lot of feminist authors like Simone de Beauvoir, like even Malala. Like a lot of these like young women who just like have shown that when you use your voice, you can get this major platform and people will listen to you.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, as a member of the WZCC Australia, you have a platform anytime you want. I mean, that's what it is all about. I mean, like, you know, people say that you're a chamber of commerce, so you should be dealing with businesses or entrepreneurs and enterprises. But all that is still underlying all the issues that women face, right? So there are women entrepreneurs, there are women professionals like you, and women passionate about their cause. So all I can say is thank you so much for taking the time today, but also, if you need a platform, if you need another outlet, if that's the right word, I'm offering the services of the WZCC Australia, you know, and I genuinely mean that. I think we have to start somewhere, and you know, any opportunity to talk or to write something. So if you want to write an article or two for us, or you want to invite us to some functions, or you want to anything that you any help you need, and this is a genuine offer. I'm not just saying it for the sake of the podcast. I genuinely mean that. I think that every little bit counts. And if we can play a little, even a small, insignificant role, I think it'll be worth it. So thank you so much. More power to you, Awa. And, you know, hopefully we might be able to catch up sometime later just to see whether you've made any headway and whether there's anything else that, you know, you can do to, you know, what more power to you. Thank you so much. God bless.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure. Take care. Bye.
Bye.